Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show. You're listening to the Barbell Logic podcast. This is another episode of the Coaching Success series. I'm your host, Matt Reynolds. Hey, happy Friday. Glad you're here. Today, we're going to dive into the excuses that derail, or the excuses that derail progress. And so I've thought a lot about this lately, and want to start with a thing that you've heard before, which is that we focus on things that are simple, hard, and extremely effective, right? And that's really the outpouring of voluntary hardship. We choose hard things because valuable things are always hard. Valuable things are never easy. Hard things through voluntary hardship always refines. You've heard me say this before. Involuntary hardship doesn't necessarily refine. Voluntary hardship always refines. However, for some of you listening, and for me, this is a problem that I have, or a challenge that I have. Many of us who are business owners have superhero mentality. We think we have to do it all, or who else will do it? And the reality is that you can actually probably do every job better in your business than anyone else can, especially in the beginning. But you have to understand logically that creates an unscalable business. So at some point, you have to learn how to delegate out those jobs. And if you do that well, as your business grows and matures, you'll be able to delegate those jobs and those tasks out to people who will do them far better than you can as the owner. And that's where we're at now at Barbell Logic. But there was a day when I did all the work, and I probably did all the work better than anybody else could. But man, that was a long time ago. And so one thing that I noticed back when I owned Strong Gym, and I've paid attention to it for certainly the past 10 years or so, and I don't have any published evidence of this. This is just experience, both for myself and talking to lots of other business owners, is that I think there's about an 18-month rule of 80-hour work weeks. And what I mean by that is that when you start a new business, often, especially if it's a coaching business, which is why many of you are listening to this podcast, you often have to continue to work your day job. So 40 hours a week, doing whatever else you do that you're probably not that crazy about or not that happy about. And then you have to work second shift. Maybe you work an additional 25, 30, 40, 50 hours on the job or the business that you're trying to build. And in the beginning, for the first year or so, it's all wonderful and it's exciting and it's yours. And there's a lot of pride there, and you take personal responsibility in it. But you really are on a ticking time clock. You've got about 18 months, give or take probably 6 months, depending on the type of person you are. You might only have 12 months. Maybe you can pull this off for 2 years, where you can work 80-hour plus weeks, and then you're going to burn out. It's why we have to make progress as quickly as we can and not allow things to derail us, like certain excuses, which I'll talk about in this episode. And they're not going to be the typical sort of excuses I think that you're thinking about, the things that maybe we've covered on the podcast before about just like get to work and do the thing. And it's, you're being lazy. It's not that type of excuse. I'll get into where I have really seen, I think, honed in on the things that cause business owners to fail. And so if we understand that we have a finite amount of time to work 60, 70, 80, 100 hours a week, and then we're going to burn out, then pretty early on, we have to start to set boundaries for ourselves on when we allow ourselves to work and not work. And so as a business owner, the work is never done. I have an ongoing list. I mark stuff off the list. I add stuff to the list. And it's not like I'm clocking in and clocking out and the work is done at 5 p.m. I have to make a conscious decision every day when to stop working. And for me, those boundaries, as you've heard many times before, I get up really early and I work hard early in the morning so that I can have those boundaries in the late afternoon to stop working and spend time with my wife and my kids and church community and do those things, so that, because those are the most important things that are never going to be urgent in my life. And so you have to be able to set those boundaries and do that well. Nikki does this incredibly well. Nikki Sims is wonderful at boundaries. And I think it really often stems from a time in your life, maybe when you weren't great at boundaries. And I think she saw that, and she certainly holds to those very well in her own life. But she also has really communicated that as part of the culture at Barbell Logic now, to have boundaries. You shouldn't feel like you're constantly in bondage or in burden to your 24-hour clock for online coaching or whatever the job is. And so when you understand that the job is never done, then you have to set boundaries for yourself and stick to those things, and then just get as much work done as you can in the hours that you have allotted to yourself to knock out work. And so how do we get ourselves to the point where we're not working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, and we can actually stick to our boundaries? And that really comes down to understanding we have to learn how to write systems and standard operating procedures, and then actually delegate them out, like literally give them away to someone else and give them ownership of those SOPs. Excellent standard operating procedures or excellent SOPs help us avoid micromanaging. It gives us permission to delegate and trust the new owner of the SOP and to make it their own. So again, you often in the beginning of a business, you're the business owner, you're the manager, and you're the technician, or all of the technicians in your work. And so you build all of these standard operating procedures, which is really nothing more than a checklist, a to-do list, usually put in order of how you want to get it done chronologically. And that's usually ordered by importance and urgency and things like that. And then you hire it out and delegate it out and give it to someone else and make it their job and their ownership. And then they have ownership of that SOP. And they then have, because they have ownership of the SOP, they can find places to make that standard operating procedure even more efficient, even more effective than it was when you ran it. And that's how you start to know that that person is at some point crossing over and doing a better job at that SOP than you did or that you would have, right? And so in order to do this, it really requires radical self-honesty and awareness. It is imperative to be able to hire and delegate out what you suck at or what you hate, which is usually stuff you suck at. So if you hate a thing or you suck at a thing, if you suck at customer service, I mean, you really suck at like answering the phones and being super kind, especially to maybe clients who are not that easy to deal with, then you have to hire a customer service person who is an excellent people person who's just got tremendous likability, or whatever that thing is, requires you to have radical self-honesty about it. And so know where your strengths are and play to your strengths, and hire out and delegate your weaknesses so that the business itself has no weak link. That is imperative. And so I want to talk for just a minute. We've mentioned this several times on the podcast. Andrew has as well, about Dan Martell's book called Buyback Your Time. It's a good book. He's kind of a big influencer, and I don't always agree with every single thing that he says, but the book is actually really good and super easy to read. This is a direct quote from him from his book. He said, "To be honest, likely no one will care as much as you do, because it's not their company, their money, or really their customers. Maybe no one ever will do it quite like you. So here's what you do. You don't aim for 100% perfection. Instead, you shoot for 80%. Yes, lower your expectations, because here's the deal. 80% of the work done by someone else is 100% freaking awesome. And that's the key. You know, when you first hire that position, they're not going to be able to do it as well as you do, but you let them grow into it. And 80%, if they do an 80% as well of a job as you did, that's a win for you. So that 80% rule of good, if you hire somebody that's 80% as good as you, you win. And he goes on to talk about your buyback rate. If their hourly rate is 25% or 1/4 of yours, then you doubly win, because you bought back your time and it made you money at the same time. Well, how did it make you money? Well, because you're paying them 1/4 of what your value is, which means you now get to spend that time that you hired out for them doing something that has higher value for you and for your business. So it makes your business not just time, but it makes it money, right? And this is how you calculate your buyback rate. Again, this is from Dan Martell, so I don't want to steal it from him. I want to give him all the credit. He gives an example. They're big, huge, round numbers. So just, again, I want to quote him. So he says, if your company pays you $1 million a year, which certainly no one is getting at Barbell Logic or even close, then you make $500 per hour. He bases this on 40-hour work weeks. And of course, you can, people, their amount of hours they work is all over the place. But just to keep it constant, we can kind of base it on 40 hours a week. So if your company pays you $100,000 a year, then you make $50 per hour. If you get paid $24,000 a year, then you make $12 per hour. Until you learn to buy back your time from the low value tasks and start focusing on the high value ones, you won't be able to build the life you want. Learning how to make these trades is the game. So you look at how much your company is currently paying you, and here's how you do the math to figure out how much you can afford to pay someone else. And he introduces the buyback rate. And the buyback rate calculation says this. His rule of thumb is that no one, not a founder, not an administrative assistant, not a baseball player, not a barista, should be performing a work task that they could outsource for 1/4, i.e. 25%, of their current effective hourly rate. So if your effective hourly rate is $100 an hour, then your buyback rate is $25 per hour. Why do I calculate your buyback rate as 1/4 of your hourly rate? Because I want you to get 4 times your ROI when you're hiring someone else using your buyback rate. So he takes an example. Let's take Tina, a small business owner. Assume she makes $200,000 a year from her business. So her business is effectively paying her $100 per hour. 1/4 or 25% of that is $25 per hour. So her buyback rate is $25 per hour. If she can hire out someone to do the job, to outsource or delegate for $25 per hour, then she wins. She gets much more work for the time. She can then spend her time doing jobs that are worth $100 per hour or more. So she's not stuck doing work that is only worth $25 an hour or less, right? So again, it's not about being too good to be a custodian or clean the toilets or whatever the thing is. It's that if your value is significantly higher than that, then you've got to free up your time to be able to do that. So one of those big killers, one of the big excuses, since that's what the podcast is about today, is the inability to write good systems and standard operating procedures and actually delegate them out to other people, to outsource them to good workers, right? And understanding the concept of the buyback risk or the buyback rule and understanding the calculation is really imperative there, right? Now, I want to dive deep into the specific killers or excuses that derail. And I'm talking about, I've really thought about this a lot lately. I've thought about this. These are extremely practical things that I've seen in my life, in my business life, in the life of other business owners that I'm friends with or mentor. And I'm sure there are lots of potential excuses and things that derail, but these are the 4 primary excuses or killers that I see that derail people's life and business all the time. So the first major excuse or killer is fear. And this often presents itself in one of several ways. One way it presents itself is the staller, right? You sabotage your own success by hesitating on big decisions because you are fearful of making the wrong decision. Or sometimes this fear manifests itself as the saver. You have money in your bank account, but don't understand the value in spending it on growth opportunities for the business. So you let that money grow like a nest egg instead of investing it in your business. You are way too conservative, which is a form of fear. You have fear of making the wrong decision, fear of having that crucial or awkward conversation with someone else, fear of how to de-escalate hostile situations. We must learn how to deal with the hard things or they grow like cancer and stop progress and often even drive us backwards in our business and life. We cannot let fear derail. Being a business owner requires a level of being able to handle fear and stress all the time. That's what being a business owner is. And so if fear derails you, or if it is an excuse, you must make war on it, or you have to understand that your personality may not be cut out to be a business owner, right? The final example of fear that I have is the micromanager. This person lacks trust in their staff to get the job done correctly. And it's often because of a lack of good standard operating procedures, or they or you fail to properly train others in your business. So you micromanage them, failing to empower them to grow and to learn. So the micromanager is a symptom of fear. So fear is the first big killer or excuse that derails business. The second one is chaos. Chaos derails. This often presents itself as what I might call the speed demon, or impatience leading to chaos. You make rapid decisions such as hiring the quickest, easiest, or cheapest option, driving chaos in your business and quickly finding yourself in the exact same position again, or you spend a life drowning in urgency, which again is what the book I'm writing is all about, is about undoing urgency. Your home must be a place of solace. Your workspace needs to be set up for efficient work and nothing else. You must order the chaos. We've got a great podcast we did a couple years ago, probably a year and a half ago, maybe, on ordering the chaos. And I think chaos is a huge, when business feels constantly chaotic, and maybe not just business, maybe just life, maybe your home is loud and crazy and people are yelling and the TV's turned way up and it's just nuts all the time. You're living a life of chaos and you have control over that. You can take control over the chaos and put it in order. The third major killer and excuse is the self-medicator. You turn to food, alcohol, sex, or other vices to reward yourself when you have success, but you also often rush to the same destructive activities to escape or anesthetize the stresses of business or life. I've certainly been there in my past. I still sometimes struggle with trying to self-medicate with alcohol. Maybe it's a celebration, or maybe it's just to take the edge off because I'm stressed out. This is a massive derailer. It anesthetizes us. It makes us less present in our business, less present in our family. Some of these things, food and alcohol on some level, they are not immoral things. They're amoral. They're neutral things. But there are other vices, certainly, those things even that are amoral, like food and alcohol, can be abused. And certainly other drugs that I would argue there's no easy or proper way to utilize those. I think sex is another thing that can be used in a very healthy way, but also in a very unhealthy way. And so we have to recognize when we are self-medicating via vices and understand how they derail our business. And the fourth killer and final excuse that derails us is stubbornness. Stubbornness derails. It's a lack of taking personal responsibility. We have to learn the skill of authentically being able to say, my fault. I realize this is a blanketed statement, but I think this is a big millennial and Gen Z problem right now. I see it with my kids who are Gen Z. I've seen it with people who have worked for me, with clients who are millennials. They have this attitude, this authority issue that just because you told me to do it this way, even if it's right, I don't want to do it because I absolutely hate authority and I'm incredibly stubborn. That is asinine. So stubbornness derails. When someone tells me, Matt Reynolds, that there's a better way to do a thing than the way I'm doing it, and I recognize that they're right, I am overjoyed because they just saved me time, money, and heartache. If you're stubborn, it stems from the issue of not being able to say my fault and take personal responsibility and own up to your mistakes. That is an extremely important skill to acquire, is personal responsibility, owning up to your mistakes and learning my fault. You're owed nothing. So the 4 big killers / excuses that derail are fear, chaos, the self-medicator, and stubbornness. Think about your life and which of those, maybe some version of all 4, maybe it's just one that is glaring at you, are the things that you need to attack and make war on so that it doesn't derail your business. So there you go. Let's make war on the excuses. This has been another episode of the Barbell Logic Podcast Coaching Success Series. As always, I would be so honored to receive a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Please share the podcast with a friend or family member or business acquaintance or anyone that you think can get value out of this. Again, they don't have to be in the fitness business. I think there are a lot of great takeaways on these Friday episodes about just how to run your life, principles, values, business, all of those things. And of course, the podcast on Tuesday with Nikki and Andrew is absolutely fantastic about how to do fitness and strength well, how to experience strength for improving quality of life, not allowing it to be a burden on you, but to actually enjoy the process and to play the long game. And so again, if you get value out of these podcasts, Tuesdays and Fridays, we would love a 5-star review. Say something nice about us, tell somebody else. Let's keep driving up those numbers and drive the algorithm up for sure. You guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you next Friday.